I still remember the exact moment my life tilted, so quietly that I didn't even realize I was falling until I was already too deep to turn back. It was early autumn in Boston, the kind where the air smells like wet leaves and old brick, where the sky always looks like it's thinking about rain. I had ducked into a small cafe near Beacon Hill, more to escape my thoughts than the cold. I was sitting alone by the window, pretending to read, when he appeared beside my table. "Sorry," he said, his voice low, careful. "Is anyone sitting here?" I looked up, ready to give a polite no and return to my solitude, but something stopped me. His eyes weren't demanding space. They were searching. Like he wasn't just asking for a chair, but permission. "No," I said. "Go ahead." His name was Michael Reed. He told me that after ordering a coffee he didn't really want, just to have something to hold while he talked. We laughed about small things at first, how cafes always play sad music even when people are falling in love, how time seems to move differently indoors. But then the conversation deepened, effortlessly, like a river finding its path. We talked about our pasts in fragments. About dreams we were scared to say out loud. About the loneliness that hides behind being fine. He listened in a way that made me feel unguarded, like I didn't need to explain myself all the way for him to understand. When we stepped outside together, the city lights flickered on, and the street looked softer somehow. He walked beside me, not too close, not too far. When our hands brushed, neither of us pulled away. Over the weeks that followed, Michael became a quiet constant. Morning texts that didn't ask for anything. Long walks where silence felt intimate, not awkward. He noticed details, how I always touched my necklace when I was nervous, how I stared out the window when my thoughts got too loud. He remembered things I said once, casually, and brought them back when I least expected it. One night, we lay on the roof of his apartment building, wrapped in a shared blanket, the city breathing beneath us. I told him something I had never said out loud before. "I'm afraid," I whispered, staring at the stars. "I'm afraid that one day I'll fade, that the people I love will look at me and realize I'm not really there anymore." He turned toward me slowly, as if the moment deserved care. "If that ever happens," he said, "I'll be the one who remembers you. Even if you forget yourself." That was when I understood. Love didn't arrive like a storm. It came like warmth. Like recognition. Like coming home to a place you didn't know you'd been missing. I fell for him in the quiet moments, in the way he said my name, in the way he made space for my fears without trying to fix them. I didn't know then how fragile happiness could be. I only knew that for the first time in a long time, I felt fully seen. And I believed, naively, desperately, that love would be enough to keep us there forever. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Everyone gets tired. Everyone has weeks where the world feels heavier, where getting out of bed requires negotiation with your own body. I blamed the changing seasons, the workload, the quiet anxiety I'd carried since my early 20s. Anything but the truth, because the truth was too vague to fight and too frightening to name. But Michael saw it long before I was ready to admit it. "You're not laughing the same way," he said one evening as we cooked dinner together. He wasn't accusing me, just observing, like someone afraid of losing a landmark in the dark. "It's like, the sound is there, but the light behind it is dimmer." I tried to brush it off. I always did. "I'm just tired," I said, forcing a smile that felt stretched thin. "You worry too much." He didn't argue. He never did. But later that night, as I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling while his breathing stayed steady and deep, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't tired of the day. I was tired of existing inside my own body. The exhaustion crept into everything. My thoughts slowed. My emotions dulled. Some mornings, I would sit on the edge of the bed and feel like there was an invisible wall between my intentions and my muscles. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him what was happening inside me. But the distance between wanting and doing grew wider every day. Doctor visits became routine. White rooms. Polite voices. Words that sounded clinical and harmless until you carried them home with you, autoimmune response. Neurological fatigue. We need more tests. No one could give me a clear answer. Just possibilities. Just time. Time, I learned, can be cruel when it refuses to explain itself. Michael came with me whenever he could. He sat beside me in waiting rooms, his knee bouncing, his jaw tight. He asked questions I forgot to ask. He remembered dates, medications, symptoms. Sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, like he was trying to memorize my face in case it changed without warning. One night, after I canceled plans for the third time that week, he finally said it. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. We were sitting in the dark, the city humming outside the window. "I don't know how to help you. And I don't know what I'm losing." The words cut deeper than any diagnosis. "I'm still here," I said, but my voice trembled. "I just need space. I need to figure this out." What I didn't say was that I was afraid of becoming someone he would have to take care of instead of love. I was afraid he would wake up one morning and realize that the woman he fell for, the one who laughed easily, who dreamed out loud, who met him halfway, was slipping through his fingers. So I started pulling away. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to protect him. Or so I told myself. I stopped initiating conversations. I let silences stretch. When he asked how I was feeling, I gave him edited versions of the truth, softened, manageable, incomplete. I could see the confusion growing in his eyes, the way he searched for me in moments where I used to be present. One evening, as he helped me to the couch after my legs gave out unexpectedly, his hands shaking just slightly, he whispered, "Please don't disappear on me." I wanted to promise him I wouldn't. But promises require certainty. And I was no longer certain of anything. The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon when I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. My face looked the same, but something essential was missing. The spark. The glow. The version of myself that believed love could shield us from everything. I pressed my palm against the mirror and felt a sob rise in my chest. I was still breathing. Still here. But I was fading in ways no one could see. And the man who loved me most was watching it happen, helpless, afraid, and slowly realizing that love alone might not be enough to hold me together. Michael didn't leave. That was the strangest part of it all. Even as I withdrew into myself, even as conversations became shorter and silences longer, he stayed. But something in him began to change. I could feel it the way you feel pressure before a storm, subtle, constant, impossible to ignore. He stopped talking about the future. Not because he didn't want one, but because he didn't know how to imagine it anymore. He used to fill quiet moments with stories, ideas, half-formed plans. Now he filled them with actions instead. He fixed things around my apartment that didn't need fixing. reorganized shelves that were already neat, took on extra shifts at work without mentioning it, as if motion itself was the only thing keeping him upright. When I asked him what he was thinking, he'd smile gently and say, "Nothing important." But his silence was loud. At night, I felt him lying awake beside me, his body tense, his breathing shallow. Sometimes he would get up quietly and stand by the window, staring out at the city like he was waiting for an answer to appear between the buildings. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him I was still fighting. But my voice felt buried under layers of fear and fatigue. One evening, I caught him rubbing his temples, his eyes red and distant. "You should sleep," I said softly. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment the mask slipped. "I'm afraid if I sleep," he said, "I'll wake up and you'll be farther away." The words broke something open inside me. I realized that while I was losing pieces of myself, he was losing his footing. His world had narrowed to me, my appointments, my moods, my fragile energy. Love had become vigilance. Hope had turned into endurance. Still, he refused to let go. I overheard him on the phone one night, his voice low and strained. "I don't care how hard it gets," he said. "I'm not walking away. I just need to know what I'm fighting." That sentence stayed with me. What I'm fighting. Because the truth was, neither of us knew anymore. He started researching obsessively, medical journals, support forums, anything that might offer clarity. He scribbled notes in the margins of old notebooks, underlined phrases, highlighted possibilities. Sometimes he brought them to me, his eyes hopeful, like a child offering a fragile gift. And sometimes I couldn't even look at them. "I can't do this right now," I'd say, turning away. Each time, I saw something dim behind his eyes, not anger, not resentment, but disappointment quietly swallowed. The worst part wasn't the arguments we didn't have. It was the conversations we avoided. He was unraveling slowly, holding himself together with sheer will. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped when he thought I wasn't watching. In the way his laughter sounded practiced. In the way he still touched me, with care, with reverence, as if I were something precious and breakable. One night, after I snapped at him for hovering too much, he stood there silently, his hands clenched at his sides. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I just don't know who to be if I'm not trying to save you." That was when I understood the cost of his love. He was becoming a shadow of himself, not because he was weak, but because he was giving everything to a battle he might not win. And still, he stayed. Still, he chose me. Even as it tore pieces out of him. As I lay awake that night, listening to his uneven breathing, I realized something unbearable. I wasn't the only one fading. The man I loved was disappearing too, quietly, bravely, and without ever asking for credit. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, missed details, half-remembered moments, patterns that only made sense once it was too late to ignore them. And Michael was the one who saw it first. I noticed the shift in him before I understood the reason. His exhaustion sharpened into focus. His desperation became direction. He stopped grasping at every possibility and began narrowing in on something specific, something buried beneath the surface of my illness. One afternoon, I woke to the sound of papers rustling. Sunlight spilled across the bedroom floor, and Michael was sitting at the small desk by the window, surrounded by medical records, old emails, appointment summaries I didn't even remember receiving. "You should be resting," I murmured. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his face was pale but steady, like someone who had crossed a line and couldn't go back. "Do you remember the clinical trial you signed up for 2 years ago?" he asked. I frowned, searching my memory. Barely. It was supposed to be harmless. Just monitoring. Supplements. "That's what they told you," he said quietly. My chest tightened. He explained slowly, carefully, like he was afraid the truth might shatter me if he moved too fast. The trial hadn't been properly regulated. Side effects had been underreported. Several participants had dropped out, some with symptoms eerily similar to mine. Chronic fatigue. Neurological fog. Emotional blunting. "They knew," he said, his voice breaking for the first time in weeks. "Or they suspected. And they didn't tell you." The room felt suddenly too small. I remembered the forms I barely read. The reassurances. The way I trusted strangers with my body because I believed science was safer than uncertainty. Something had been taken from me, slowly, quietly, without my consent. Anger flared in Michael like a controlled burn. He made calls. Sent emails. Pushed past dismissive responses and legal language meant to exhaust people into silence. I watched him confront doctors who avoided his eyes, administrators who spoke in rehearsed sympathy. "You don't get to call this unfortunate," he snapped during one meeting. "This is a life." I had never seen him like that. Focused. Unyielding. Terrifyingly calm. And yet, underneath it all, he was still gentle with me. He held my hand through the worst days. He reminded me to eat. He whispered reassurances when my mind spiraled into guilt, because somehow, I still blamed myself. "I should have known," I cried one night. "I should have protected myself." He pulled me against him, his heartbeat frantic beneath my ear. "This isn't your fault," he said fiercely. "They took something from you. And I won't let them pretend they didn't." The investigation became his purpose. He wasn't just fighting for answers anymore, he was fighting for justice. For acknowledgement. For the version of me that had been slowly stolen. But every step forward cost him something. Sleep became optional. His hands shook when he drank coffee. His eyes carried a permanent shadow. I could feel the strain in the way he held himself, like a wire pulled too tight. One evening, after a particularly brutal phone call, he sat down heavily and buried his face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. "I don't even know if I can." I knelt in front of him, forcing him to look at me. "You don't have to fix me," I said. "Just don't lose yourself trying." He smiled sadly. "I already have." That was when I realized the truth had consequences beyond exposure. Beyond accountability. Love had pushed him into a battle that would change him forever. He had chosen to act. To stand between me and a system that saw me as data instead of a person. And in doing so, he crossed into a version of himself that could never go back to who he was before. Because when something precious is taken from the woman you love, you don't just search for answers. You become someone willing to pay any price to reclaim what was lost. Love didn't just change Michael. It rebuilt him from the inside out, then left the scars visible, like proof of survival. The man I had fallen in love with was gentle in ways that felt effortless. He laughed easily. He believed the world, at its core, was fair if you tried hard enough. But the man standing beside me now carried a different weight. His kindness had sharpened into resolve. His optimism had been tempered by reality. He moved through life with purpose, not hope. I saw it in his posture, the way his shoulders stayed squared even when exhaustion threatened to pull him down. In the way his voice had grown steadier, lower, when speaking to people who once intimidated him. He no longer asked for space, he claimed it. There were days when I barely recognized him. He learned how systems protect themselves. How silence is weaponized. How persistence can be mistaken for aggression when it comes from someone who refuses to step aside. He memorized legal language the way some people memorize prayers. He knew exactly which doors would close, and which ones might crack open if he pushed hard enough. And every push cost him something. He lost friends who told him he was obsessed. Colleagues who quietly distanced themselves. Nights of sleep. Pieces of himself he didn't have time to grieve. His world narrowed, not because he wanted it to, but because fighting for me left no room for anything else. One evening, after months of hearings, documents, and unanswered questions, I watched him sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. His coffee had gone cold. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from fatigue. "You don't have to do this anymore," I said softly. He looked up, eyes hollow but determined. "Yes, I do," he replied. "Because if I stop, then what they did becomes normal. And I can't live in a world where this is allowed to happen quietly." I realized then that love hadn't just made him stronger. It had made him dangerous, to injustice, to indifference, to anyone who thought they could take something irreplaceable and walk away untouched. But strength has a price. He flinched at sudden noises now. His patience with small talk had evaporated. Sometimes, when he thought I was asleep, I felt him watching me like he was counting breaths, afraid to miss one. And still, he was gentle with me. He spoke to me carefully, as if I were something fragile but sacred. He kissed my forehead before leaving for meetings that drained him. He apologized when his frustration spilled over, even when it wasn't aimed at me. "I don't want to become hard," he confessed once. "I don't want this to take away who I am." I reached for his face, feeling the tension beneath his skin. "It hasn't," I said. "It's just shown me how deep your love goes." But inside, I knew the truth was more complicated. Love had lifted him, and wounded him. It had given him purpose, and stripped away his innocence. And as I slowly began to stabilize, to reclaim fragments of myself through treatment and time, I wondered what would be left of him once the fight was over. Because he had given everything to keep me here. And some sacrifices don't disappear just because the crisis does. They stay with you. They shape you. They become part of the man you had to become in order to survive loving someone like me. Recovery doesn't arrive like forgiveness. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't erase what came before. It comes quietly, almost suspiciously, like something that might leave again if you acknowledge it too soon. The first sign was breath. Not the kind you take without thinking, but the kind that fills your chest and stays there, steady, unafraid. One morning, I woke up and realized I wasn't bracing myself for the day. I wasn't negotiating with my body. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I was just awake. Michael was standing by the window, his back to me, watching the city stretch into the morning. The light caught in his hair, touched the sharp lines his face had learned to carry. He looked older. Not in years, but in knowing. "You're smiling," he said without turning around. I didn't realize I was, I answered. He turned then, and for a moment neither of us spoke. There was so much between us, pain, endurance, love sharpened by fear. We had survived something that didn't leave visible ruins, but had rearranged us from the inside. I think I'm coming back, I said carefully. Not all at once. But I'm here. His breath caught. Just barely. I never stopped believing that, he replied. But there was something fragile in his voice. Hope, once broken, never returns untouched. Life didn't return to what it had been. It moved forward differently. Slower. With more intention. We learned how to exist without constantly scanning for disaster. We relearned laughter, how it sounds when it isn't borrowed from relief. How silence can be peaceful again. But love still hurt. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary moment, grocery shopping, folding laundry, brushing our teeth side by side, I would see it in his eyes. The memory of almost losing me. The reflex to stay alert. To protect. And sometimes, I felt the echo of who I used to be. The woman who moved through the world without hesitation. Without the knowledge of how easily everything can be taken. One evening, as we sat on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch, he finally said what we'd both been carrying. I don't think I'll ever be the same, he admitted. I took his hand, feeling the strength there, the same strength that had once held me together when I couldn't do it myself. Neither will I said. But maybe that's not a loss. He looked at me, searching. Maybe it's proof, I continued. That what we had was real enough to change us. That it mattered. He leaned his forehead against mine, his voice barely a whisper. I would do it all again. I closed my eyes. So would I. Love doesn't always save you the way stories promise. Sometimes it costs you sleep. Innocence. Versions of yourself you never get back. Sometimes it demands endurance instead of joy. But it also teaches you how deep a human heart can go when it refuses to let go. We didn't come out untouched. We came out honest. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Love is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to stay. Even where it hurts.
Subscribe, like, and tell people about this love.